This conference will now be recorded.
This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone. And for roll call, Councillor Ham has sent her regrets this evening. We'll now take a moment of reflection and respect, please. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of June 15th, 2022 as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? We'll now move into delegations and public meetings. And our first delegation this evening is Christine Scrimgeour. She's doing a presentation of the draft audited 2021 financial statements. Good evening, Christine.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I will do the presentation. I want to start the meeting or start my presentation first by thanking the treasurer and her staff for all their assistance through this audit process. As you can imagine, with COVID, there's lots of hurdles that we have to climb through or go over during the audit process, and we try to do as much virtually as we can, and they have been a great assistance in facilitating this final product that you have before you tonight. So these are the consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021. When it says consolidated, I just will mention a couple things here. So in your consolidation, we have the Police Services Board and the East Elgin Community Complex. However, we only pick up one half of the East Elgin Community Complex because that's the half that we own as the town of Aylmer. In addition, we pick up our percentage of the Aylmer Secondary Water Board. Because you are the primary user of that water board, we pick up just over approximately 97% of that water board in these financial statements. And then finally, you also have an investment in what's called a government business enterprise, which is Earth. And so we do pick up our percentage ownership of that, including their increase in as their surplus for the year, as well as the dividend that they declared. So all of that to say these are consolidated with all of those pieces, moving pieces in them. Moving forward to my auditor's report, this is an independent auditor's report, and it is what's called a clean opinion. So that means that I did not find anything materially incorrect. What I mean by that is when we are on site and virtually, we audit all of the streams of revenue that the town has, as well as your purchases and your payroll. And we statistically sample into those different cycles. Because of that work, I can issue this clean opinion. It's dated as of today's date, which hopefully is the date council approves these statements. Under Canadian auditing standards, you are those charged with governance on this entity. And so once you have given your approval to them, we can finalize them. And then we move forward to finalizing the FIR, which gets submitted to the province on your behalf. So moving forward to the consolidated statement of financial position, which is really what we call your balance sheet. And I'll just, what I usually do, and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to stop me. but I try to highlight the changes from year to year. And so right off the bat, under financial assets, you see that land held for resale. So we did purchase some lands this year in order to develop them in future. And so that is now an asset on your balance sheet, and you can see that there. Under liabilities, I don't have a lot to say there. They're fairly consistent, other than there is no new long-term debt. You, as a municipality, have a very low level of debt, which is great. Coming down to that net financial assets. So that number is always the number I look at, probably the first thing I do when I get to set up financial statements, because that's the amount of money you would have in the bank if at the end of the day, everyone paid you what they owe you and you were paying off all of your liabilities. And as you can see, we've had a great trajectory. It's gone from just under 14 million at the end of 2020 to 17.3 million at the end of 2021. So significant increase there, and again, a positive movement there. Then under the tangible capital assets plus capital work in progress. So this is what the assets that you have in place to provide the services you do. So road work, water, wastewater, buildings, those are your tangible capital assets. And so the next item I always want to see is that you are replacing your assets at least equal to what your amortization. So the amortization, we've talked about this before, is just the using up of those assets. So we want to see you replacing assets in that same neighborhood. And if you added the tangible capital assets with the capital work in progress, which are just tangible capital assets that have not yet been completed, you can see that we are very consistent. And in fact, you've increased somewhat a little bit. So that shows me that you're reinvesting in capital assets. You haven't taken out any new debt. And when we get to the reserves, you'll see that in the reserve fund, you'll see that we've also increased those as well. So all that coming down to an accumulated surplus at the end of the year of 83 million. And as you can see, a good portion of that is in your tangible capital assets. Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, we'll move to the next statement. So this is your consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So with the budget for 2021 compared to your actual for 2021 and then the actual for 2020. So I'll make a couple comments on changes from the budget to the actual for 2021. Really the only large differential is in the user charge area, and we are seeing this throughout all of our municipal clients. Water, wastewater usage has gone up. So your revenue from that source has gone up, mainly because of the work at home orders that were in place for a good portion of 2021. I'll remind council that any surpluses within those systems are moved over to the water, wastewater, or the water, the water and the wastewater reserve funds. So they are retained within the system and do not have an impact on your general surplus. So that's the increase mainly in that total revenues versus last year and this year and the budget. Under expenditures, I'll remind council again that we do not budget for amortization, and so which would be in the actuals for 2021, but we also pick up our share of both of the secondary water board. So you'll see in the environmental services area, there is an increase there. So expenditures overall are fairly consistent to budget. And then moving down to that excess of revenue over expenditures line. So that's the amount of money. So what I'm looking for there is to make sure that your operating revenues are covering your operating costs, plus or minus any capital implications there and amortization. And you can see there that you are in fact around the 900,000. You're just over $1.1 million last year. So very consistent there. Everything below that line is the other, which are the items that we receive or items that are not part of our general operations. So mainly to do with capital. So you'll see we have the government grants, which is just the capital grants, the developer and other contributions. So that's where we recognize DCs and other federal gas tax monies, etc. And then underneath that, the investment increase, decrease in earth. Obviously, you have no control over that. That's just something that you receive from their financial statements, and you can see there was an increase there, 441,000 in your investment. The gain loss on disposal of tangible capital assets, you did sell some land this year that resulted in that gain. And then the increase, decrease in post-retirement benefits. So it was a small increase of $11,000 from the prior year. So all that to say, again, these financial statements is a strong position from a cash flow position with your revenues covering your operating expenditures plus amortization. And that all flows down through to the accumulated surplus, which at the end of the year equal to the balance sheet. Any questions on that at all? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. The next statement is your statement of cash flows. This shows the increases and decreases of the non-cash items on the balance sheet. And most of these numbers we've already discussed as we've gone through them. So I don't think I'll spend a lot of time on this. Again, acquiring more assets than what our amortization cost is, which is what we want to see. And then the next statement really just pigeonhole, really just brings into focus what's going on in the capital asset area. And that again shows the, so if you add, sorry, Josh, if you just come down one more little bit here. There we go. Thank you. So the amortization for the year is just under 1.7 million. And then our acquisition of tangible capital assets, net of the change in work in progress, which is about 2.5 million, sorry. 2.3 million. I can't add apparently. Anyway, which obviously is over your amortization of tangible capital assets. So again, replacing your assets at more value. And again, I'll remind you, as we've discussed at a couple of the other meetings, the tangible capital assets are being amortized at historical cost. Obviously, what assets require in today's dollars versus what we probably originally put them in place at will be at a higher dollar value, obviously, because things obviously cost more now. And so just replenishing those assets is important to maintain that, which you are doing. Then we get to the notes to the financial statements. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. They are very consistent from year to year. And if you want to, Josh, come forward to note number 8, first off, that would be great. Perfect. So this is your deferred revenue that was on the balance sheet. I just want to draw attention to this because these are really like reserve funds. The only difference is that they are have stipulations placed on them by the government as to what you can and cannot spend them on. So they're not governed. Reserve funds are stipulated by council. These are stipulated by the various grant opportunities and the DC bylaw. And so you can see that we depleted a little bit, but mainly in the area of the OCIF funding, which is replacing capital assets. And then note number 10 is really the note council's probably the most interested in, which is really the breakdown of all of your reserve funds. And you can see there we've increased them by almost $1 million. And you can see the differences there. Council will remember at the end of within 2020, we started the new council initiatives reserve, which flows from the dividend that's declared by Earth. And you can see we had a significant increase there. And then as well, we moved over the surplus of about $220,000 into reserves as well, which one for both property taxes and general initiatives, or not, and the surplus really. So overall, an increase of $1 million there, which is again a good indicator that you're in a strong financial position because this is really your savings account and it is increasing. The only other comments I have is at the back of these statements are 2 schedules. One is the schedule of tangible capital assets, which breaks down your assets by component type. And as you can imagine, your linear assets are your largest value, and about 75% of your assets are in that area. Linear assets are your water, wastewater, and road systems. And then the last schedule is your schedule of segmented information, which is the breaking down your revenues and expenditures by function, which is how the FIR is sent to the province. And so this just is a segue between the audited financial statements and the FIR that gets submitted to the province, because it is all on function base, which just is the various departments really. I have met with both the EECC board and the Police Services Board to present their financial statements, which were approved by those two boards before we've met here tonight. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Councillor Oslach.
Yes, your worship, to Christine. How do we stack up?
You ask me this every year.
That's right. And against other municipalities.
So, I mean, it's very difficult to compare municipalities because everybody does different services and does it in a different way. I would say that you're trending in a really positive way. Again, the savings towards future, as you all know, just even let's look at the price of petroleum and the nature of the assets that petroleum based are significant. And so just items are going to cost a lot more money in the future, as we're all aware, even in our own personal lives. And so I would just urge council to continue to increase your reserve funds to be in a good position to be able to keep your debt level at the level it is. That is the really positive point that your municipality has, is that your debt level is extremely low. Size of your municipality.
So basically, we're in good financial shape.
You are.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine.
Keep going though.
Are there any other questions for Christine? I don't see any hands up, Christine. So I guess that is the completion of your report. It's a great report. And thank you very much for coming, Christine.
All right. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Josh, do you have the resolution, please?
That council receives the delegation from Christine Scrimger, auditor of Scrimger and Company, for information, and that council approves the 2021 draft audited financial statements as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Our next delegation is Kimberly Earls. She's the Executive Director of SCORE, and she's here this evening to discuss future of short line rail. Good evening, Kimberly.
Good evening.
And the floor is yours, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me here this evening to give you an update on the Short Line Rail project. Next slide, please, Josh. We'll just jump right in. So this evening, I'm going to give you an overview of how the project is progressing. And we'll start with just a general overview. So next slide, please, Josh. So the objective of this project, and many of you are aware of this, is a reinstatement of the Cayuga subdivision short rail line, which runs roughly from just east of St. Thomas through Elgin County, through the more southern parts of Oxford County, and into Norfolk County. And the project is a revitalization of the line. So the objective is to improve the infrastructure along the line in order to increase efficiency and longevity of rail service to the region. And next slide, please, Josh. The project will take place over the next 3 years. And again, this is just a map, a little bit more of a visual, although I see that I'm short on the line. It really does extend into Cortland and Norfolk County. So the Cayuga subdivision is about 25 miles long along that corridor. And the infrastructure has been somewhat neglected over the past several years. As many of you may be aware, there have been several meetings of regional municipalities over the last probably since 2014, off and on, to discuss the future of the rail. And so we've extended sort of our time and efforts into this area, and we've looked at a business case to see what the activity and the economic opportunities are along the rail. So next slide, please. So this line, by revitalizing this line, it will connect CN and CP rail lines from the Cayuga subdivision to a variety of businesses that are that utilize this rail, and again to a larger North American rail network. This line did operate for decades until CN initiated the discontinuance process in early 2020. Recognizing the potential along the line, Geo Rail, which is the short line rail operator, obtained a lease with CN and reinstated operations in early January 2022. Through extensive consultation with local business, it was very evident to us that there was significant need for efficient rail service. And sorry, next slide, please. That business study, when we examined that, we realized that there were about 400 jobs across the region tied to that, as well as significant economic impact. So when the businesses were surveyed, they had indicated collectively that without the rail service there would be about an annual loss of just under $8 million per year. And again, an annual increased logistic costs, again, collectively at about 1.5 million. And then the next few slides, the next slide there, it shows a breakdown of the rail crossings and the rail properties by county. And then this first one is in Elgin County. And certainly, as you guys are aware, there's a great potential within the town of Elmer. And I believe that you've invested recently in the industrial lands that you have ready for development that are also accessible by rail. And then maybe the next two slides we can zip through a little more quickly. There, they identify the lands in Oxford County and finally in Norfolk County. And so some of the benefits, next slide, please, Josh. And some of the benefits are the long-term investment in infrastructure, increased environmental sustainability of transportation. So again, as Christine had mentioned in the last delegation, we certainly all recognize that fuel and petroleum costs are increasing. And so having that rail infrastructure gives businesses along the line, and again, within the wider sectors that they serve, an opportunity to have more some predictable logistics costs. And again, you know, having those business supply chains, having that strong piece of built-in assets, certainly, again, support our business community. And next slide, please, Josh. The project itself, this is a bit of a breakdown. And I apologize because this slide, the project costs, the full costs are around 7 million. These are the costs that are eligible through funding program. So we identified that there would be about $7 million that would be required to upgrade the rail so that it would be in alignment with the Class 1 rails in terms of ability to have increased traffic and increased weight along the line. And so we have decided that our best strategy moving forward was to make an application to the National Trade Corridor Fund, which is a federal funding program. Next slide, please. And so we did seek provincial funding. We did not find, we're not successful in finding any provincial funding that aligned with this at the moment. And we are seeking municipal funding We are asking at the county level, Elgin County, Oxford County, and Norfolk County for some investment funds with the National Trade Corridor Fund, because it is a federal funding program. It is quite competitive, so they would want to see as much regional support as possible. Also included in the project funding, we have several letters of support and financial commitments from the businesses along the line. And in Elmer, in particular, that would be one of the anchor businesses is the IGCP business there in Elmer. And next slide, please. Again, this kind of breaks down the crossings by county, and we're looking at Elgin County here and each of those road crossings. The crossings and the electronic upgrades are again the lion's share of that budget that we just looked at a slide or two ago. And the next two slides outline the same sort of crossing detail for both Oxford County and Norfolk County. So the QRail rail line revitalization project will include the following major project activities. Upgrade the two bridges, one located in New Sarum, the other in Tillsonburg. Upgrades to 24 crossings, including resurfacing and replacement of electronics. Replacement of about 8,000 track ties, and upgrades to improve safety at various sidings along the line. These project activities will extend the lifespan of the rail 20 to 50 years at a minimum, improving the safety and the reliability along the line. Additionally, these upgrades will increase the weight capacity and align those with those Class 1 standards to improve overall efficiency along the line and serve the businesses within those excuse me, along that line as well. So today what we are requesting you as the council are a letter of support for our application to the National Trade Corridor Fund, recognizing the value of the project not only to the town of Elmer and our partner counties, but also to the sectors that are most readily going to benefit from that. And that is the agricultural sector. And again, the major tie-in there is through the IGCP facility in Elmer, as well as the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing businesses along those lines are part of a larger regional supply chain and certainly bring a lot of economic activity into the region. And with that, I will wrap up and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kimberly. Are there any questions for Kimberly from council? Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
Through your worship to Kimberly, while you're working on the line, are all the crossings marked currently, or is that a work in progress?
Through your worship, do you mean have we identified each of the crossings? Is that?
Yes. Are there crossing signs at each crossing, or have some been removed and not replaced, or what's the status there?
I am not aware that any have been removed without being replaced or pegged for replacement at this point. If we're successful in receiving the funding application, the process or how that will sort of, the rollout will go is the short line rail operator will connect with each department within the county where the crossings lie, and they'll go through the appropriate steps to make sure that the crossing signs are there and the upgrades are done. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any crossing signs removed at this time.
Okay, so if we find a crossing that is not marked, who should we contact?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, you absolutely should probably contact the short line rail operator, and I can provide that information as well to you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Your worship to Kim. The rail bridge in Tillsonburg is over the Otter Creek. That's quite a large bridge. Is it? Are you doing that safety or inspecting that or refurbishing it?
Yes, through the mayor, through the chair. Yes, so that bridge, we did have some engineering, rail engineering specialists have a look at that bridge, and there will need to be some rivets placed there, along with some resurfacing of the bridge itself. And so that is included in that overall $7 million replacement and upgrades budget. Interestingly enough, the one of the engineers had mentioned that it, you know, other than some minor repairs, that it was in excellent shape, really, for the activity that had occurred along the line. So that was encouraging to hear.
That bridge has been in service for a long time.
Yes.
Thank you, Kim.
Are there any further questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. To Kimberly, yes, there are some crossings where the buckboards have been taken down. One in particular has it on one side and nothing on the other. If you don't get the funding that you're requesting, what would be the status of the operations?
So certainly if we're not successful with the National Trade Corridor funding, GEO will still continue to operate along the line, but it will definitely be at a decreased capacity, which will certainly impede some of the business activities along the line. And again, IGCP in particular, because of the reinstatement of the rail line, we're able to invest in some other revenue opportunities, which they didn't have before the line. So it will be a much slower process to move forward. And there may be some, you know, negative economic impacts because of that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Kimberly? Go ahead, Councillor Chapman.
Through you, Your Worship, to Kimberly, I just want to say that it's so nice to see the moving back to rail. It should save a lot on fuel, remove some of the transports from the highways, and hopefully make the highways safer, but also using fuel in a more efficient manner. I'm very happy to hear that they're in the process of making this happen.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Oslach.
Your Worship, through to Kimberly. That rail line used to extend to Delhi and to Simcoe. Is there any, in the future, we're going to extend that rail line?
Through Your Worship, unfortunately, portions of that track beyond where we've identified, so just east of Cortland, I believe have been removed. And so I feel that would probably be an unlikely prospect, at least in the very near future.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments from council? Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Thank you so much, Kimberly. And have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Take care. Josh, could I have the resolution, please?
That council receives the delegation from Kimberly Earls, Executive Director of SCORE, Future of Short Line Rail, for information, and that council directs staff to prepare a letter of support in principle as requested by SCORE.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Charlton. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, adoption of council and committee minutes to approve.
That council approves the following minutes. Regular virtual meeting of council held on June 1st, 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And minutes to receive.
That council receives the following minutes. Elgin Area Primary Water Supply System Joint Board of Management held on March 3rd, 2022, and Elmer Area Secondary Water Supply System Joint Board of Management minutes held on March 9th, 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is consent agenda 7.1 to 7.3.
That item 7.1 to 7.3 of the June 15th, 2022 consent agenda be received for information with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. I just have one comment. Next Thursday, the museum is taking possession of the Hamilton Ward Cathars building. The keys are presented, and the Elmer Malahide Museum and Archives is taking possession next Thursday.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Oslach. Are there any other comments about the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Now we'll move into action items. The first report is Fire 06-22.
That report, Fire 06-22, entitled Elmer Fire Department Operational Update, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton, and I'll turn it over to Chief McCone. Good evening, Chief McCone.
Good evening, Mayor French, members of council. Nice to see everyone. Just a few little highlights I'd like to bring to everybody's attention on the report, just really quickly. An interesting fact under suppression activities, as of this morning, we're at 42 calls that we've responded to so far this year. And at the same time last year, we answered to 39. So we're relatively on target with the previous years. As everybody noticed, we have our information pamphlets available to our folks in Elmer on the open burn bylaw, as well as the fireworks bylaw. Those are available at the town office and at the fire station. We will also make the fireworks information packages available to our vendors that sell fireworks. So we'll get the information out to the people who needs it and try to control our ones that go against the rules. Another one that I'd like to bring to council's attention is on page 5 underneath the apparatus. We'll remember everybody, we talked about the new fire apparatus in 2021. When the supply and demand for apparatus was relatively normal, as we've identified through our presentation by treasurers and audits. Everything's going up in price. So I just like to take a moment to give council a huge pat in the back. You saved your municipality a great deal of money by acting the way you did, and you all deserve to be recognized for that. As you can see, I included a little section from our Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, and it supports that the price is going up to 30% on some of this activities, and on fire trucks, that's a lot of money. That's all I have, Your Worship, to bring forward, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief McCone. Are there any questions? Okay, I don't see any hands up, but if we're handing out pats on the back, you certainly deserve a pat on the back too, Chief McCone. You and Tara, you're doing a great job, and you are really getting the message out to the community, and that's very important, and I want to thank you for that. Excellent job and excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks, Council.
So with no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Report Finance 07-22.
That report finance 0722 entitled Development Charges Reserve Statement 2021 to 2022 be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second, please. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Oslach, and I'll turn it over to Heather. Good evening, Heather.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to touch on a couple things with the DC statement in front of you. I'm separating this from the other reserves because it is an obligatory reserve, as Christine was mentioning in her financial statements presentation. So I just wanted to point out that we did accumulate $198,000 worth of DC charges in 2021. So with the reserve interest, contribution to reserve and prior period adjustment of this reserve, there was about 1.2 million available to fund DC related projects. So the one prior period true up that I'm referring to is 2017. There was a public works building adjustment. The reserves that the amount that was taken out of the other reserves was 201,000, and I've trued up that amount back to the original reserves and taken it out of the DC's the actual DC reserve. So basically the ending balance for 2021 was 1.25 million. So we'll basically be able to identify projects going forward with the capital budget that have a DC component, and we'll actually have the detail of what portion of the project's DC related versus what portion of the project's going to be funded out of debt reserves or taxes. So with that said, I'll try to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather? I don't see any hands up, so all those in favor? And that's carried. The next report is Finance 08-22.
That report finance 08-22 respecting the asset management plan be received for information, and that council approve the updated asset management plan and direct staff to provide periodic updates as required.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton, and I'll turn it back over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you two and members to members of council, our staff have worked very hard on this. Chelsea being our point of contact, she's done a great job at moving through all the details in the past from the 2019 updates till this point, which we are going to meet the ministry deadline of July. So we've taken a multidisciplinary approach to creating this baseline document. Basically, Chelsea has been the point of contact for updating the replacement costs from the operations perspective, challenging some of the philosophies that we had in the past with some of the data presented from the audited financial statements, and turning it into something that's we're going to actually be able to use for a proper asset management plan going forward. So this asset management plan we're going to use and update every year. It'll enable better decision making for asset management priorities, improves capital budgeting, long-term forecasting. It will identify the risks that we have in our community to offset through capital infusion. Basically improving our financial planning and ensuring that we are eligible for infrastructure grant opportunities and showing that to the AMOs and the LOS and the provincial government. So the replacement costs are ongoing. That's our biggest challenge right now, is to basically identify all of the replacement costs that we have, make sure they're relevant. As Christine was mentioning, our balance sheet is valued at historical cost, which is nowhere near what the cost of these assets are now. So that's our biggest challenge, is going to be the funding requirements. So we have to work towards funding this whole asset management plan by 2024-2025 timeframe. And with the work that Chelsea's put in and the rest of the team, we're going to be able to hit that target. It'll just be a matter of figuring out where we're going to get the funds. So some of the estimates have come from the wastewater studies that we just did last year, the DC study. We've had in-house consultation with some of the professionals. We've had engineering estimates. Basically, we take the best information we have and update this plan. So some of the conditions will need to be reviewed before we purchase the next round of assets coming up in 2023 to 2026. But there will be a building RFQ going out for facilities to review a lot of these large buildings and the condition in 2022. So any projects in the next 10 years, as I said, will be reviewed per our engineering standards and have our capital built to this standard. Our risk assessments will be updated on a yearly basis as the information becomes available. So that being said, the asset management review has identified that we are in a decent position to meet future requirements, but we continually have to put asset money aside so that we can consider, which assets are the priority and actually have the money to fund some of these things. At this point, every other municipality is in the same position we are, but I believe that we are actually in a better position because we are further ahead in our review and we're further ahead in our analysis to this point. So we do have the full team here. Andy, Rob, Chelsea, and myself. If council has any questions, we can collectively try to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Barber, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Heather, as buildings or infrastructure matures, some of it will deteriorate quicker than others. Does the asset management plan take into account things that are historically better performing as compared to others that are more needy?
So generally our buildings, the estimated useful life has been set up per the standard that was in the asset management plan. But basically the review of the condition of each asset will allow us to adjust the estimated useful life. So if we go and we're looking at the condition of the Public Works building and it's been set up for 60 years and we're noticing, or it's 80 years, we're noticing that there's a degradation in the condition, we can adjust that. There will be an impact on the financial statements, so we have to all talk about it before we do that, but we have the ability to adjust the useful lives, and which will in turn reflect on the financial statements. So at this point, specific condition types by building, I don't believe we have them done completely, but we do have a generic, 60 to 80 years type of amortization happening for these buildings.
Just as a follow-up then, so it's a living, breathing document?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for Heather? Go ahead, Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship to Heather, I noticed in the asset management plan, our swimming pool is useful for 25 years and it currently is 37 years old. Is there a chance that we may not be able to get it passed at one point without spending a substantial amount of money on it? Or is that going to be looked at in the recreational master plan in 2022, 2023? Thank you.
Your worship, and to Councillor Charlton, absolutely, that's part of the review for the Parks and Recs master plan. All those facilities will be reviewed. We can look at, updating the replacement values at that time, consider the condition assessment, consider what needs to be done, and we'll use those inputs for the capital budget for 2023 onward.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for Heather? I don't see any. I'm just going to make a comment, Heather. I think this is great what you've done, because what you're doing is you're getting our ducks in a row so that we're prepared, so that if there is funding available, we can be sure to capitalize on that. And another thing I like is the fact that you are streamlining it to a way that it's an ease of use, right? So that it's easier for staff. You've got it set up so that you can go back and forth and you can find out what you need in an easier fashion. So kudos to you, because I don't know about the rest of council, but I find that asset management is, wow, it's a hard one to wrap your head around. So you're making it look pretty easy. So thank you so much for that. If there aren't any further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Finance 09-22.
That report, Finance 09-22, entitled Amendments, Employee Policy Statutory Days Off, HR Policy 7.1 Full-Time Vacation, be received as information, and that council endorsed the update of the following policies. HR Policy 6.1, including the deletion of subsection D, respecting statutory holidays for full-time employees, which reads as follows: any day proclaimed as a holiday by the Dominion, provincial or municipal government. And HR Policy 8.4, bereavement leave clarified. And then further, Tuition Refund Policy 9.1, reference to tuition tax credits. And further, HR Policy 9.6, employee recognition reference to part-time start date. And further, HR Policy 7.1, vacation full-time reference to full-time start date and prorated vacation time. And that staff with a town parking pass be informed that this will be reported as a taxable benefit to the Canada Revenue Agency in future tax years. And further, that staff with the town be informed that the incremental self-funded eye care reimbursement has been updated for all employees. And further, that council directs staff to present a bylaw repealing the bylaws 2015 and 1815.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. And I'll turn it back over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with the onboarding of our new HR manager, we've taken this opportunity to review and realign some of the policies that are needed to be updated for clarity ahead of the launch of our new employee handbook. So this will be, our goal is to issue this by the end of the year so that's presented to the new council. Some of these policies haven't been updated in a very long time. So the new handbook will meet the accessibility requirements. It will simplify policy updates similar to what we're doing with the asset management plan. It's going to be a living, breathing document. So as ESA changes, as CRA, requirements change, as any other HR items come up, legislative, we'll be able to update this and we'll be able to get it out to our staff in a timely manner so that we're not having these conflicting policies and so many questions and, conflicting information. So it'll flow nicely into our onboarding, our launch of our new onboarding checklist, our training and retention initiatives that HR has on their list for tasks this year, as well as other HR improvements. So as outlined in this report, these are purely housekeeping items that we pulled forward ahead of that handbook update, just to kind of stop some of the questions that staff keep repeatedly asking because of these policies being so out of date. So we just want to update the full handbook for transparency, simplicity, relevance, and of course, statutory and regulatory requirements. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And thank you, Heather. The next report is CAO 46-22.
That report, CAO 46-22, entitled Award, Request for Proposal, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, be received for information, and that council approve award of the RFP to Stantec in the amount of $57,569.50. And further, that staff be directed to enter a vendor agreement with Stantec for the provision of preparation of the 2022 to 2032 Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Oslach. And I'll turn this over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. This report is before council to award the consultant services for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that will set out our action plan for amenities and services over the next decade. Staff are recommending award to Stantec, which received 90 points in the consensus marking process. Their proposal is also under the council established budget for this project. Stantec was the only proponent. However, as identified, their proposal was a very high caliber. The timeline is for the consultation to be completed later this year and for a final report to come forward in Q1 of 2023. Staff are very excited to engage with the community on the development of this plan. I always try to under-promise and over-deliver, so I don't want to oversell this master planning process. But I do think it has a potential to result in real significant changes and enhancements to a lot of local services. I've heard from a lot of individuals and groups that will really benefit from participating in this process. So as this proceeds, we're really going to utilize our connections and our communications to get significant participation in this process, so that the vision developed is really an accurate reflection and representation of what the community wants and where they want to go. And with that, I'll try to answer any of your questions, and I might ask for Rob for help too.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy from council? Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, to Andy. Will there be a public meeting for the public input in this master plan?
Through you, Mayor French, yes, there'll be, I believe there's at least 2 public information centers required. So and that was part of the reason why we delayed it from last year, was we really wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity for people to get in the same room and talk about this.
Thank you, Andy.
Are there any other questions from council? I don't see any hands up, so with no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is CAO 47-22.
That report, CAO 47-22, entitled Delegation of Site Plan Approval, be received for information, and that council approve the proposed bylaw delegating authority to staff for site plan approval.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman, and I'll turn this back over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. This report is being presented as a result of Bill 109. As of July 1st, council will lose their ability to approve site plan. And so council is required to delegate authority to staff, or the town will lose our overall ability to approve site plan. This delegation will be to the Director of Corporate Services, Town Clerk, or their designate. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next report is Clerk 29-22.
That report, Clerk 29-22, entitled Information and Records Assistant, Student Co-op Opportunity, be received for information, and that council authorizes the treasurer to take the necessary financial actions in order to proceed with hiring an information and records assistant co-op student through the Western University Master of Library and Information Science program for a period of 4 months.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman, and seconded by Councillor Charlton. And I'll turn this over to you, Josh.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. And 2 members of council. Council will recall approving and endorsing the purchase of Laserfish software earlier this year in allocating some of the municipal modernization funding that was received in 2020 and 2021. Staff have made progress with that software. Some of the victories that we've had to date include apologies. We had a COVID screening form that was circulated. Staff are currently working on a accounts payable and accounts receivable process. And we've also been working with the vendor on other functionalities, such as a future document repository and online planning application templates. One of the challenges that we're running into with the current vendor is that they're dealing with many other municipalities that received the same funding that we did to implement similar projects. So that's causing a bottleneck in terms of their service delivery. We're not able to move as quickly as we would have liked. So what staff are finding is that, and when I say staff, I mean the deputy clerk and the special projects manager, so Owen and Chelsea, they've had a lot more success in creating these Laserfish forms, these business processes and workflows themselves internally. Owen has taken it upon himself to learn the system, and he's become quite competent. So what we're thinking at this point is that rather than relying on the external vendor to hold our hand and walk us through this process, and constantly be providing us with sort of out of the box solutions. If we have some more support internally, we can reallocate some of the funds that were previously anticipated for purchasing solutions and build them ourselves. And one of the benefits to that is that we're less reliant on the vendor for future projects. So if we have, the vendor creating it for us and we need a form updated, there's a good chance that we're going to have to pay the vendor again to make that change. Whereas if we build it ourselves internally, we've got the skills in-house to not only create but also to maintain our system. So as council is also aware, there is a major staffing shortage right now. In the public and private sector, many organizations are struggling to attract and retain talent. So Owen and I put our heads together to try and come up with a creative solution to attract somebody. So we ended up identifying the Master of Library and Information Science program at the University of Western. This is sort of the exact field that these students are looking to get into. Many of the graduates from that program end up in the municipal field, and we were happy to see that they have a co-op program. So one of the benefits to the co-op program is that these are short-term projects. It's a 4-month term. We ended up coming up with an ad just to comply with the current hiring timeline. And within that ad, the compensation is, we sort of followed their suggestions. It's in the amount of $25 an hour with a 4% vacation pay. And then throughout the 4-month work term, 35-hour work week, it presents an approximate budget impact of about $11,800. So we've spoken with the town treasurer, and it's been confirmed that with current salary gapping, and as a result of vacant positions, and with existing reserves that were allocated for records management, that we have been unable to expend as a result of the vendor being quite busy with other clients, this position would present no major budget impact whatsoever. So with that, happy to take any questions, and I'll try my best to answer them.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Chapman.
Through you, your worship. So to Josh, will this equate to any savings on our part, other than the fact that things will be done more quickly because we're not waiting for the vendor?
Go ahead, Josh.
Through you, your worship, and to Councillor Chapman, really the savings would be indirect in that when we reserved money for the project, we set aside money for both the purchase of the software, which has already been completed. There's an annual maintenance fee for the software, which we'll continue to pay for years to come. But then we also had reserves to purchase those out of the box solutions. So I guess in some regards, paying for somebody to come and work on this for us is sort of the trade-off that we would likely end up purchasing less of the out of the box solutions directly from the vendor. And then we're also anticipating savings in that, if staff in-house are familiar with the workflows and the business processes, we're not going to need to rely on external expertise to keep them updated and keep them working into the future.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Chapman?
I do, through you,
Go
your
ahead.
worship. So the fact that we're training our staff and getting them prepared to do their own out-of-box thinking, I think that's a very good idea. I'm very pleased to, and it offers an up-and-coming student an opportunity to experience the municipal world, and who knows, it may lead to employment down the road. So I think it's a fantastic idea.
Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
Through your worship to Josh, I'm not just sure what this person is going to do. It talks in the report here about retention and disposal of records. It talks about the record vault. Are they going to be sorting piles of records up on the 3rd floor and cataloging that, or I'm just not sure what they're going to do. They talk about to increase efficiencies. Aren't we efficient enough as it is, or what are they going to do? Thanks.
Go ahead, Josh.
Certainly, through your worship and to Councillor Charlton. So there's sort of two key aspects to our records management program at Town Hall. One of them is obviously the physical records. That's the record room in the third floor, as you've mentioned. And we're sort of in the process of working towards digitizing our records. So there's a lot of efficiencies in terms of having a digital document repository that we can refer to rather than going down to the file room to pull a record. And sort of throughout this process, we're anticipating that the student would play a large part in using Laserfiche sort of as the tool, as the document repository that a lot of these physical records end up in. So that could include tasks such as scanning and archiving information, helping to create those databases, and then also allowing different document repositories to communicate with each other. So, a good example is that we've got the tax roll system. So we've got, roll numbers for every municipal address within the town of Elmer. But then we also have another database that includes all of the bylaw records. So all of the bylaw infractions that we've received. Currently, those are two separate document repositories. One of the great functions that Laserfiche can do is that it can pull data from both of them. So rather than having to look in two different places for data on a single municipal address, we would put the municipal address into the system and it would pull all of the data from all of the different databases that we currently have. So as far as efficiencies, I think that's what we're sort of speaking to. This is a program that is really in its infancy right now. As you said, Owen and Chelsea have made major strides. We've only been working on it for several months at this point. But really the bottleneck in terms of fully rolling it out and using Laserfiche to its full capacity is person power. We just don't have enough staff to roll this out. Initially, we anticipated that the vendor would do a lot of the work for us, but we're finding that that's really not going to be the case.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Charlton?
Yeah, pretty much for now. Thank you.
Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Yes, your worship, to Josh. What is the timeline on this project? And due to the labor shortage, everybody and business is trying to hire people. There's no people out there for hiring. So what is the timeline?
Go ahead, Josh.
Through your worship and to Councillor Oslach, we really don't have a firm timeline in that there are many small projects associated with the rollout of the software. So Laserfiche is something that really can affect all aspects of our business. So as I mentioned before, we had COVID-19 screening forms were all done through Laserfiche. So that gets rid of physical paper and it makes us more efficient. We've got, the project that's a document repository. So that's something that, is a constantly sort of a living document, a living group of files that we're going to continue to add to. And it's sort of constant. I wouldn't say that there's a firm timeline to necessarily being complete this implementation, because we'll never be finished. We'll constantly be adding on to it. But what I would say is that as we continue to roll it out, we sort of continue to create our own internal standard operating procedures. We become more familiar with how the software works. And those are kind of the key deliverables right now, is setting up the system so that we can continue to improve it and continue to build it out as time goes on. I hope that answers your question. It's sort of a living repository of documents that can undertake many different functions.
Thank you, Josh.
Are there any further questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Thank you, through your worship. Can you hear me? I had to change out my headset partway through.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I think it's really important to note that for any kind of record retention, that, if there was ever an audit involved, this is key. And this is where a lot of companies are transitioning to. So, just the fact that, we're taking that step is so important. Like I say, if we were ever audited, something like this is like, it will be our saving grace. So the amount that we're investing to get this going and to get someone to come in and train, train the staff, I think it's such an important role that that this person is taking on coming in, and the initiative that the town has done to look into this, and out of the box thinking like that. It's great to hear what you've done for this, because this could be key for the town. If we were ever in something that that required old documents. I mean, this is what's going to save us. So it's great that we're taking the initiative. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any further comments or questions? Well, I'm just going to make a comment that I'm pleased that we have Laserfiche, and that it's the gold standard, and a lot of municipalities use it. And I'm so happy that our staff have brought this forward recently, and we're getting it, to the point where we feel comfortable with it. And I think bringing on this student is just going to add to that and get it up and running even better, because a lot of municipalities use this and they're very pleased with it. And so I think it's great. So thank you, Josh, for this report. Are there any other questions or comments? Do you have another comment, Josh?
Certainly, Mayor French, just to add on one additional comment, if there's any members of council that would be interested in seeing some of the progress that we've made, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to show you some of the products that have already come out of our staff in-house. So,
Councillor Oslach, go ahead.
Your worship, I would be interested in Josh.
Okay, are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up, new business and matters of urgency. Reading of bylaws and proceedings thereon for 3 readings, Josh.
Council approves and gives 3 readings to the following bylaw. Bylaw 2222, being a bylaw to delegate powers of council related to site plan approval under Section 41 of the Planning Act 1990.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second, please. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Are there any inquiries by members? Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
Through your worship, I don't know who currently owns the former Carnation plant, but unless we're going to put a herd of goats there for the summer, that grass should be maintained. The property should be maintained a little bit. People coming into Aylmer from the north, they see this hayfield there. It doesn't give a good impression. So I'd like to see that cleaned up a bit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further inquiries by members? Okay. Statement and committee reports. Don't see any hands up for that. There is no report of the mayor today. No notice of motion. Oh, sorry. Did you have a comment, Councillor Oslach, or a statement?
Yes, your worship. On the way to north on the bridge baskets, they look marvelous today. Just one comment. And the hanging baskets look, and Talpa Street look really wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Are there any further statements? Okay, I think we're at notice of motion. I don't believe there is a notice of motion this evening. So we have to move into a meeting close to the public. So the resolution, please.
The council moves into a meeting close to the public at 8:12 p.m. to discuss the following matter. Chief Administrative Officer report CAO 4822 respecting litigation or potential litigation, and this is respecting a legal opinion. And this item is closed to the public pursuant to Section 239(2)(e) of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended as it's a matter of litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board.
Thank you, Josh. Someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.